Okay, I want to welcome everybody to the first episode of my series, The Strange and Unexplained Phenomena of the South Mountains of North Carolina. I'm your host, researcher, investigator, and content creator, Kaiser Rebel. I appreciate all of you for joining us. Let's jump right into this episode that I have titled A Family's Night of Terror. Quick word about the South Mountains. The South Mountains is a mountain range, and it covers roughly 100,000 acres. It is in the counties of North Carolina: Cleveland County, Burke County, Rutherford County, and McDowell County. The surrounding areas of wilderness around the South Mountains, in the periphery of the South Mountains, easily encompasses another 100,000 acres of wilderness and rural farmland. Deep creek bottoms, deep river bottoms. The terrain is beautiful, but in places it's unforgiving and very steep. It's Appalachian forest, and here we are, the first step to the Smoky Mountains. It's a paradise for wilderness lovers, hikers, campers, hunters. But the account shared to me by this family that I'm about to describe proves that around here, the paradise can be turned into a nightmare after the sun goes down. The story begins on the afternoon of July the 26th of this year. A family who, by the way, that I know very well, and I'm friends with them, they arrived here to camp in an undisclosed location. I will not disclose the exact location, although it is very near to where I sit right now as I share this account with you. Set in a creek bottom of a small stream that feeds one of the major creeks here in northwest Cleveland County. Very isolated area. And I'm not going to reveal the family's identity either. I will respect their request for anonymity. But they arrived that beautiful July day, and they began to set up camp in this secluded spot. And I joined them. And the sound of their children laughing and playing filled the forest, and they were just having a great time. Mom, dad, 22-year-old son, 19-year-old son, 9-year-old son, and 7-year-old daughter. And they got camp set up, and just a wonderful day. As nighttime started approaching, they lit a campfire, and I bid them adieu and left them. I wanted them to enjoy their family time. And as they reported, they just sat relaxing and talking about whatever subject came up. The kids were playing. And they had no idea the terror that they were going to experience that night. As the fire died down and the conversation died down to a more hushed voice, they began to hear sounds. Now, it's important to note that they were not unaware of the reputation of this area. They were very educated on things. The dad is an experienced outdoorsman and hunter, and he has hunted this area, and he has heard sounds like I'm about to describe. So they weren't unexpected. But first they begin to hear the sound of a distant wood knock. Now, that is a well-known sound in the world of cryptid investigation. And it's simply where something or somebody picks up a piece of wood and it strikes a tree. Very distinct sound. They heard that. And then from another location in the distance, they heard more wood knocking. And it stopped. And as they listened, then they began to hear whoops. I will try to mimic that sound for you. It's a well-known sound in the area of cryptid investigation. But it sounds something like this. Whoop, whoop. I don't do it justice. It's far creepier in real life. And they begin to hear that. And they report to me that they were put on guard, but they were excited that they got to hear this. And they had anticipated not getting to hear it because I told them the chances of it happening was probably pretty slim. And so they were excited, and they began to drift off to sleep. The fire had died down even more. Dad went out went out first and soon was sleeping. Mom was drifting off to sleep, but she was suddenly awakened by her children, and they alerted her with some very ominous words. And they said, "Mom, there's something in the woods." And so she came out of her tent to investigate. And suddenly there was a voice. It was very close to them, very close to their camp, inside the woods across the creek, but very close. And she reports to me that this language that she was hearing was not, quote, it was not a human language. And Mom is a very educated and very intelligent person. And I believe her when she says that. But she said it was not a human language. She said she responded in a strange way with the only thing she thought of at the time, and she said that she out loud stated, "I am sorry if we disturbed you and we were making too much noise." And in reply to that, from a second direction, a different source, she heard a voice speaking this same strange language. And it sounded angry. And then the first voice from the first location said something else in this strange language. And then that was it. They heard no more of the language anymore. And they were up, and they were on guard and alert. And they began to hear walking near their camp in the woods. Now the husband, being an experienced outdoorsman and hunter, he reported to me that it was something walking on 2 feet. And then from a second direction, they heard the same thing of something walking on 2 feet in the woods, not far from their camp at all. And then from a third direction behind them, and it became very obvious that they were surrounded. And they huddled, and they were terrified. It's happened to me, and it is a terrifying feeling being in the dark woods, being surrounded by something, and you don't know what that something is. And they debated on what to do. So Dad decided that they would just stay in place, huddle together. They were armed, but he said that being armed didn't do anything to help alleviate the fear. And I understand that. And the walking from the 3 different directions continued for what seemed like an eternity. And they endured it. They rode out the night. They were afraid to try to leave. They were afraid to do anything other than sit there and watch. And they began packing up 30 minutes after they stopped hearing the sounds of these things walking around them. And that was well before sunup. And by sunup, they were packed up and leaving the area. So he had texted me and asked me to call him, and they told me the story over the phone that morning. And I heard the terror and the fright in their voices. And I asked, did this language sound like gibberish? And they said no. The mom said no, it sounded like some form of communication. It just wasn't human. So I sent them a link to what is called the Sierra Sounds, or the Samurai tapes. It was some tapes made in the 1970s in the Sierra Nevada mountains of California. And you can easily find that on TikTok or whatever platform. You can Google it, and you'll find these tapes, and you'll get to hear them for yourself. And the family still talks about it, and they bring it up often, and I can tell that they are deeply, deeply impacted. But oddly enough, they have asked if they could come and camp again at a later date, and they've asked if I would come camp with them and maybe bring somebody else. But that's what happens when you have your own experience. You kind of get bit by the bug, so to speak, and you begin to want answers. So that's their story, and I believe every word of it. I want to thank you for joining me. I appreciate all of you, and I hope you look forward to episode number 2. Love you all.